Welcome back to the Radio Academy podcast. I'm your host, Georgy Jamieson, and it's lovely to be back with you. This week's specially extended episode was recorded live at the International Women's Podcast Festival in London, which was presented by Imriel Morgan and the team at Content is Queen in partnership with Spotify. Now in its third year, the festival is for all levels of experience in the podcasting world and was a series of talks and workshops. And it also included a place to chat and network with other women in the field. In a moment, we'll hear from audio producer and journalist Golda Arthur, who was giving a talk on how to elevate interviews on narrative podcasts. But to start, I spoke to podcaster and producer Naomi Meller. Naomi is the founder of the International Women's Podcast Awards, so I asked Naomi what had brought her to the festival.
One of the reasons I am here today is that last night at the South Bank Centre, some of you listening may have been there for Samira Ahmed's interview with Sarah Koenig from Serial. It was a brilliant evening, and Imriel had proposed to me a little while ago about the possibility of presenting Sarah with a recognition of her global impact on the world of podcasting and how much Serial and her have affected the industry that we all love and that many of us work in. So I run the International Women's Podcast Awards, and we presented Sarah last night with a Recognition of Global Impact Award, which Alice Levine from British Scandal very kindly presented to her in a brilliant fashion and gave an excellent speech. So all in all, it was an absolutely fantastic evening. Lots of talk about Serial, lots of talk about journalism and podcasting and women's place within it and journalists' place within it and how it all comes together, what the landscape looks like. It was a really, really comprehensive evening, so I think anyone who was there would have absolutely loved it.
We've just been in a session about the power of the producer. They were talking about all kinds of things. What did you learn from that session?
I really loved the idea of building trust and the authenticity that you need to be very transparent with people who are partnering with you on your podcast, contributing or being a part of it. And they spoke about use of language, which I think is really important, and being really upfront with people about the process, not leaving people in the dark or hanging when they've been interviewed and they don't know what's going to happen next. And I think I really appreciated the thoughtfulness actually of all of the contributors, and clearly they've got fantastic skills and experience, all of them, and were just wonderful at their job. But I think I really took away that need to be very open and honest with people in the first instance before you get anywhere down the road that people start querying or having any form of issues at all. It's just about that clarity of vision and being very transparent at the beginning.
You told me that you run a women's podcasting group. How can people find you on socials or website if they want to find out more about you or that group?
Alongside the International Women's Podcast Awards, we run the Everybody Collective. We are under Everybody Media is the name of our website, which is everybody-media.com. You can find us online at IW Podcast Awards, which is our social media handle. The collective has 50 or 60 members roughly at the moment. We're always encouraging other women to be involved. We have a lot of women from around the world due to the international nature of the awards themselves. Last year we had, I think it was 34 countries that we had entries from, and judges from a lot of them as well. So we have quite a lot of touch points internationally, a bit like Imriel and the festival here. And we really, really appreciate the opportunity to connect women worldwide and learn from what's happening in other podcasting jurisdictions as well.
We've just seen a session about interviewing and narrative story techniques with Golda Arthur. It was amazing, Golda. I asked you a question and said you were probably quite strict with your interviewees. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. I am really, I guess the thing is I was trained as a producer at, the BBC, the CBC, all the acronyms. And so that training comes through, I tell people what I want from them. And at the same time, I balance that out with just trying to be a decent human being. But I am quite strict because I believe as a producer, I want to stay in control of things all the time. And I think that discipline has held me in good stead because when you make things clear to people, then they actually feel a little bit more reassured and secure and comfortable, and then they start giving you these wonderful stories. So I am quite strict.
I think that makes the editing process easier as well. You were talking also about, there was a question about people who waffle and how difficult that is to just wade through when you're trying to edit a podcast.
I'm a really big believer in going upstream. So don't end up with waffly tape to edit. Like, think back, reverse engineer the process and think about how you are preparing for the interview and ask yourself, what is this really about in one sentence? And then build around that one sentence. If you go into an interview without that, you will get a ton of tape and you just have to wade through that. Now, if you don't mind, I think that's on you, but I mind. I would rather be watching Netflix than eating ice cream. My thing is, like, what is the focus of the interview? How are you going to get there? What is the reveal of the interview? And how are you going to build around that as well? I don't like to end up with waffly tape. And I like to make guests feel, like I'm here to ask you about something in particular, which is why I do a pre-interview, and then just take it from there.
You talked a little bit about sound and music, and I know you said you weren't a soundscaper, and that's a particular discipline in its own. But I was very struck by the music that we heard in the clips, and you said something really interesting about that music is also part of the narrative. Just expand on that a bit more.
So I think that people think of scoring an episode, using music in an episode, as something different than the interview itself, than the story you're telling, that is some kind of sonic element that sits in another category. And music is editorial. And I think that's why we don't use it on news programs, right? Because music can, without words, tell a story. Without words, lead you to love or hate the voice that you're hearing. It can cause you to cry. It can enhance. It can cause suspense. It's a very powerful narrative storytelling tool. And I think people forget that.
It's emotive, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's emotive. And that's why, you think about the theme music for a news show, for example, it's always like big and brassy because we are authoritative. Exactly. So, it really it's a powerful tool, and I encourage people to play around with it if you're, an independent podcaster. But to always, like, when I scored the very first episodes of my show, and I send them out to people, and I said, what do you think? And a couple of people have said, yeah, I don't know about the music, So I'm sort of really self-taught. I can certainly give feedback to someone to say, not this music at all.
Interesting, you went out and sought that feedback yourself.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did. So when I made the first episode of Overlooked, when this was a new format, new story for me, a new experience for me to be an indie, I'm very lucky to have great friends who are editors, who are writers, who are emergency room doctors. I had a little secret cabal of people, and I sent them the show, and I said, listen, I know I'm talking about my mum, but you need to give me as stern feedback as you can manage, and just give it to me kindly, basically. And they did just that. They were like, this bit is repetitive, you lost me here, I don't know what this means. And I had about 15 people who came from different parts of the media world and the world, as it were. And they wrote back to me, they gave me stellar feedback. I took that feedback on board and I made changes. We make work for it to be received by people, and I would like to think I'm humble enough to, take that, to really make an impact. I want to be the best I can be. And I think as podcasters as well, we have to be in relationship with the audience all the time. So people will write to me to say, why haven't you covered this idea, for example? And I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen to all of that.
That sounds like the perfect ending for this particular interview. So I'm going to finish that there.
Did you hear an ending there?
I heard an ending. So I learned something. Thank you to Naomi and Golda. Next, I bumped into a friend of the Radio Academy podcast producer, and one of our current 30 Under 30, Mira Kumar, who was running a session on shaping a podcast. But she was also very interested in advertising as content. We'll hear from her in a moment, but I went to a panel on telling stories that matter and money and ethics in podcasting, headed by Helen Parker from Chalk and Blade. The subject of day rates for freelancers came up in the session, and afterwards I spoke to Helen about how such an open conversation was so refreshing, but the subject of pay and knowing your worth is a big issue for women.
It's really interesting. I think it's also, having worked in America, is also a bit of a UK thing. So I think it's UK and women, and being scared of asking for what you're worth. But also, it's very difficult to benchmark yourself in this country. I think UCAN's a really good resource for that. Also, it kind of works both ways. The more frank you are as a business as well about what you can pay, the better. Because I think often there's a lot of small indies in the UK, and they often do get criticised for not paying enough. And actually, it's not them who's paying the money, really. It's the client. Yeah. But yeah, as women, I think it is particularly my age, and I hope it's getting better for a younger generation. But I think it's really... we were trained to be people pleasing and to be quiet and make ourselves not that big and not that heard. So, and we have a fear, I believe, I definitely have felt it, of you don't want to miss out because you priced yourself too high. I do think that traditionally women have been paid less. So it is true that if you ask for too much, people might get a bit shirty. And therefore the feedback loop does actually mean that you do feel the fear of what you're worried about as well. So I think it's really nice to have a kind of frank, transparent discussion about money and about... It shouldn't be that hard to know what producer should be paid, you know?
Well, it shouldn't, but yet... Yeah. It was a really interesting thing what you just said there about you're worried about going in too high in case they go, no, I'm not paying that. Yeah. And then you go in a bit lower and then you think, oh, maybe I could have got a bit more.
It's when the email comes back straight away. Yeah. And they're like, great. And you're like, oh, no, there was at least another 50 quid in that.
So how do we, as freelancers and women, go about knowing how to pitch it, knowing how to recognise our work?
Benchmarking, looking at what's advertised. So, for example, I heard a really good interview with the actress who plays Meredith Grey in Grey's Anatomy. She wanted to leave, and she was at a point that she could, and they tried to extend her contract. And she gave a great piece of advice, which I've used for myself, and also I always tell it to staff, is... She went back and looked commercially at what her value was and then went in with that as a reason. She also benchmarked herself. She said, look, the ads you put on this, it's called Grey's Anatomy, it's my character. You think I'm central to this. You'll lose viewers if I'm not in it. So there's a percentage risk to your revenue you're getting that I'm responsible for. Therefore, I should be paid this much. And I say to, when people come asking for a pay rise or a day increase, I'll say, we'll pay you market rate. You just need to show me what the market rate is.
Yes.
And show that you have the same experience as that. And you do get people who think they should be paid more than they're probably worth. And when you ask them to go and benchmark it, it's quite nice. It's quite nice for them. Yeah. Or you also get people who are like, I found 7 jobs, and you're like, yeah, you should be paid more. And now I've got justification for the business that if we need you and we need your skill set, then we need to be paying this much, because otherwise we're going to lose you to someone else. And then there should be a fear factor for companies for that. If you're not paying market rates, you're not going to get the talent. In an environment like we have at the moment where, everyone is squeezed, the companies are trying to watch their bottom line as well. So that's why I think benchmarking is important, because it is the justification for it, rather than just I want more, which I think women particularly aren't good at saying anyway. But it's a way of saying I deserve more, and finding a way for you to put numbers behind that.
Find that evidence,
make them because also a lot of companies, especially big companies, they need to go to their board and justify why they're paying people certain rates, and why they're spending money on staff, and that helps them do it. Often the person you're talking to actually has to justify it elsewhere. Everyone would like to pay people more if they could. So it's about you working with someone and not seeing it as a confrontation, I think, as well, which I think a lot of people feel that that's what they're going into. You can, with your own attitude and your own approach, you don't have to be passive aggressive and you don't have to be aggressive. You can just be assertive, and you can ask, and if they say no, they say no. And I think it's taking away some of that attachment of ego to the question as well, because I just respect people if they ask.
I think today, with it being a women's podcast festival as well, it's been a wonderful vibe.
Yeah.
I love it. And I don't know if we would have had that open, honest conversation, would we, about money, had it not been such a safe space?
Yeah, I think it does feel like a safe space. The audio industry as well, even the question we talked about what we get paid per episode.
Yeah.
I think we would have thought twice if one of our competitors was in the room. As in, like, someone who might take that information and do something. But I think that's probably true of like 2 or 3 years ago, whereas now I think everyone kind of knows what's being paid for shows, and you go up against each other all the time. And so you just have to be a little bit brave, as Ruth was about it and say, this is our rate. And it means you don't really drop below that either. There is something kind of freeing about this event and this day. In a room like this, everyone wants everyone to feel comfortable, and they want the people on stage to feel comfortable, and the people on stage want everyone in the audience to feel comfortable. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes a nice place to be.
Yeah. Miro, tell me about what you're doing here today.
So I am particularly interested in advertising today and how the advertising market is changing in podcasting. I think that the way that podcasting is funded, kind of all throughout, the big podcasts often get a lot of money, the middle tends to get neglected, some of the niche podcasts find some money, but ultimately I think the system is a bit broken. So I came here today looking for connections, looking for how people are monetizing their shows, not just in audio, but kind of cross-platform, a 360 experience of a show. And I was just in a session now with Just Add Joy, who were explaining that it's not all about CPM anymore. It's kind of selling things big picture as if you are a creative. It's not so much like, here's an ad and today we are sponsored by blah, blah. It's giving them something to feel excited about. And there's one key message that they left with me. Sponsored content, the sponsored ad should not be the price that you pay and have to get through to enjoy free content. It should be an experience, it should be enjoyable in and of itself. So that's been perfect. I'm really, really pleased with the session.
As well as going to some of the sessions today, you are
doing a workshop this afternoon.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
I think I have a lot of thoughts. I should probably stop. But
Never stop the thoughts, Mira. Never stop the thoughts.
Well, I often think that podcasting, shows, entertainment is becoming very samey, and I think that it's because we don't have the opportunity, or maybe we don't take the opportunity to develop things the way we should, with various frameworks, creative frameworks to help us think outside the box, to help us push ourselves. We judge our ideas quite quickly. A lot of companies say, come and make a show for me. We want to rival the shows that are in the top 10. So you end up making a show that looks like the top 10.
Yeah.
And then the next person makes a show that looks like that. And then the next person. We end up with just floods and floods of the same show. It's boring content-wise, it's boring format-wise, and I would rather that we sit in silence than have to go through it anymore. So my session is...
There's a quote, if ever I heard one.
So my session is about teaching people how to really enjoy that development process, actually hopefully encourage them to pay attention to it, take more time to do it, give them frameworks to be more creative, come up with formats, challenge themselves, and kind of to think of it as... just kind of think of really different ways to approach development so they're not bored, we don't stagnate in the industry.
Great to hear from Mira again, and a fascinating and frank discussion with Helen about pay. Independent podcaster Jenny Becker from the Sliding Doors podcast did a session on booking guests, and we'll hear our chat in a moment. But before that, I spoke to the podcasters and producers Raj Panda and Pilar Nalwimba. They have both worked on several podcasts together, and in 2020 they won the ARIA for the Best New Presenters for Radio 1's The Reality Tea podcast. Their session was about supercharging your podcast and taking it from 1 to 100. So I asked them to explain what that meant.
You know what, it's really interesting because I saw someone today at the front desk and she was like, tell me about your session today. And I was like, oh, it's about taking your podcast from 0 to 100. And she was like, oh, I'm at 30 listeners. And I was like, oh, no, we don't mean like your listenership. We mean like the energy that you're putting into your podcast and the results that you're getting out of it. We want you to take it from 0 to 100. So at the moment, no matter where you're at, whether you're starting a podcast or whether you're a podcaster, we're going to just take it as you walk in at 0 and you walk away knowing how to take whatever level you're on to 100. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
God, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But it's just how you do that.
Exactly. So I think, with me and Raj being
producers initially, we met at work, but
At
working
ITV.
in ITV doing social media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then transitioned into podcasting. I kind of followed her. She was like, I'm leaving. I'm like, I'm coming too.
Yeah, so my background was at BBC Radio, so I worked at Asian Network for like a decade. So I've like worked in news, audio, music across both bits, and then I went into socials and worked with Pilar, and we won awards for our marketing work, specifically on Love Island season 4, and that was where we took over ITV2's socials. So our speciality is running a social media account that speaks to its audience in a way that no other TV channel has managed to do since, to be honest.
But that is a huge part of podcasting. And actually, in some of the sessions I've been in today, they've brought in that you need a marketing plan.
Yeah.
And within a marketing plan, there is social media. It just has to be now.
Yeah, and I think like even bigger than that, because we understand what it's like to work as part of a team in big brands, as well as being independent podcasters, because I have No Approval podcast separately.
I have Almost 40, and we have an upcoming podcast that we're releasing hopefully at the end of the year called On to the Next One.
On to the next one that we do together. It's the fact that having both sides of the experience, we want to help independent podcasters to think like mini production companies. They need to start thinking of themselves as a brand, as a product, because let's be honest, that's where it's going, that's where it's been going, and just helping them, like giving them that insight, like this is how it works in big brands, but there is a way you can make it work for your independent podcaster. Unfortunately, the small print is when you become a podcaster, you also become a marketing manager.
Yes.
They've been talking today as well about the visualisation of podcasts. What are your thoughts on that?
It's important, and it's something like coming from a social media background, it's visual first. And then I moved into audio before audio like really embraced visualising podcasts. And we're in a day and age where TikTok is free. Snapchat is free, Instagram is free. So if you can reach more people by putting your face to something, then that's something that we want to help people do. But also there's ways in which you can use social media without putting your face out there. There's lots of faceless accounts that are doing great, whether they're podcasts or brands or whatever. So this week, Acast released this new research that they did, and they said 40 to 48% of people discover new podcasts through social media. If you're not visualizing your show, you're missing out on a huge amount of people.
If you have an iPhone, you have iMovie on your phone. Learn how to use it. Just takes watching a couple of YouTube videos.
It's not easy. Like, we're going through an adaptation, right? It's like the industry's still a bit blockbuster and we're moving into Netflix.
Oh, yes. That is a soundbite.
Such a great analogy.
So we've got to move with it. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but if you've got a phone, iPhone does half the job for us, and Google Pixel, their camera is amazing. Android camera is amazing. It's just about, I think a big thing is about, you know, the technology, because I bet if you're a parent, you've got probably 1 million videos of your kids, right? Yeah. I think half the issue is confidence. The other half is just getting used to the technology, like buying a tripod, setting it up. I think just practice. We're not saying it has to be like HD straight away. You just got to start slowly and give yourself, there's that room to like improve, get better. It's okay.
One of the things we're going to talk about today is like making memes and things like that. You can make memes in Instagram stories, and like if you just look at the Netflix account, they will make a meme based on one image, but they'll just change the caption on it like 1 million times. And you can do that. So there's other ways of making things that promote your podcast without the clip. Or maybe that's what you put in, the meme. Pilar's so good at getting content. She's actually just about to film this right now. I'm just telling you what she's doing. She's wiping her iPhone lens because that's how you make sure you don't get a blurry shot, right? That's how you make sure your video comes out looking crisp. And I don't see people doing that enough. Then you can just use the back of your shirt to do it. Like, you don't need to use microfiber cloth. Like, that's just ridiculous.
Although they are only £1 in B&M.
Okay, fine. If you're getting a deal like that, then cool.
Love that. She came ready with the deals.
I'm all about the deals.
But what you said is so key, because it's like everyone is figuring out affordable ways to do it. You're not going to have the budget that the big broadcasters have. We've got to just work with what we've got.
I'm talking to Jenny Becker, who did a session this morning about booking guests. Tell me about how you book a great guest for your podcast?
Oh, that is a big question. I think we need about 45 minutes to go through my whole session. It was a really great session, actually, and I think the biggest thing I'll say is it's not rocket science, and I think I'm an independent podcaster. I've been doing this for 3.5 years, I do everything on my own, and I'm just about to release my 100th guest. So what I really wanted to do is to let people understand that you can dream big, you can kind of think of the big guests you want on, but you have to work hard to get them, but it's not that hard. And I wanted people to build confidence in themselves, to be able to talk about what they want and approach people. I want them to believe that anything is possible, and also just get some practical tips. So we split it into 3 sections. It was basically all about the contact. So who is the contact, finding the contact of the person, creating the dream list, kind of bronze names, silver names and gold names. And then it was about actually how you approach them, so the message that you send. And just some ideas of I think the biggest thing for me is persistence is key. You've got to have a thick skin, and a no right now doesn't mean a no forever. So it's basically about just making sure that you keep up those contacts and keep the consistency with it, because everyone's human. Your dream guest, mine might be Gwyneth Paltrow. It's not an impossibility that she can come on my show. It just might take a while for me to get there.
I'm a great believer in, well, what's the worst that can happen? They'll just say no. I mean, and then you go, well, thank you very much, and you move on. I mean, it's always worth the ask, isn't it?
Exactly, and for me, I think getting any response is a win, because then you've got an inning. If someone responds to you, you've then got their contact details, you can follow up in a few months' time. I totally agree with you. And I think sometimes people just think, they're not going to know me, I'm too scared to do it. Just have that confidence in yourself, PR yourself, talk about yourself in a confident way. Because as you say, you can sit here and say that person won't come on, but until you ask, you just don't know.
How do you go about sorting out the logistics to actually pin that person down?
Yeah, you are right. I think you have to be flexible. I think if you are asking, especially celebrities or people in the public eye, to come on your show, you've got to be flexible to their schedule. What I will always do is I'll give them about 5 or 6 options of dates, and then brackets of time, hand it over to them when I'm free, and then they can figure it out. So I think for me it's about being flexible, but also giving them a bit of a structure of your time.
And have you enjoyed the day?
Absolutely loved it. It's been such a day full of community, talking to people, connecting with different podcasters, and it's just nice to know that you're not alone in the podcast game, and that we're all in it together. And I've learned and met so many great people, so it's been brilliant.
Thank you to Jenny and to Raj and Pilar. Lastly, I spoke to Kat Molesworth, the festival producer, and I wanted to know how she felt the day had gone.
I think as an event planner, there are 2 events running on. There are the things that are happening for us backstage, and then there's the guest experience. That's what's really important to me, is that everybody comes here and they're well catered for, they're thought about. The content is catered to what they need in order to make the best podcasts and audio that they possibly can.
I know why I feel that a women-only podcast festival is important, but why do you feel it's important to put an event like this on?
When women are together, there's a real relaxing of the things that make you tense around your work, the issues that you might have in a mixed environment. So they're coming from a place where they might be in corporate environments where they're not being taken seriously, they're being sidelined, they're not being paid as much. And when you're here, you're able to see truly what is possible, and you don't have to be on your guard in terms of what's going to happen, because you're in a room full of other people who are experiencing similar things, and they're able to share it, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, I described it to someone when I said I was coming here as a safe space, and I've heard that said today by other people.
I mean, we're so pleased to hear that. Imreal has always created this event to be a safe space for women, for people who are non-binary, for people who identify as femme, so that they can come and enjoy themselves and, explore things without having the pressure of, I suppose, what we normally have to experience on them.
Yeah. Are you pleased with how everything's gone so far?
Yes. I mean, we're so lucky that when we put out our call for speakers, I could have put on a week of events as full as this, because there is so much talent in the UK. We've had people travel from overseas to speak here. We've had speakers who are on our global stage who've come to join us. We are incredibly blessed in that we're in a space where women are naturally talented. And like, frankly, what space are women not naturally talented in? Yeah, I'm very, very happy. And that is all down to the speakers and the people who are here. Because I know in this room that connections have been made. And out of that, important podcasts are going to be made. And that's what matters.
Women are naturally good communicators, but we're also naturally good listeners. And to make a podcast, to make any audio, you have to balance both of those things.
I agree. And I also think women, we're trained to think about other people.
People pleasers, that's an expression I've heard today as well.
Maybe to be people pleasers, but we're trained to anticipate the needs of other people, which means we're really good at understanding what people want to listen to, about how the audience are reacting. We are so incredibly perceptive in that range. And I don't think we're given credit for it. It's a huge talent, and luckily for us, we're all extremely good at it.
Thanks to Kat, the team at Content is Queen, and all the people I spoke to on the day at the festival. It was an incredible day. Keep an eye on their website and socials for details of next year's festival, festival.contentisqueen.org. Have you ever thought about mentoring to supercharge your career? Well, if so, our mid-career mentoring programme, RAMP, is now seeking applications. Go on to our website, radioacademy.org, for more details. And next Wednesday, 23rd of October at 1 p.m, we're holding a webinar with myself and other past RAMP mentees, where we're going to delve into how and why to apply and how RAMP can propel your career. Please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your pods so that you never miss an episode. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Susie Grant, head of Visualise Pods and executive producer at Listen, all about visualisation of podcasts. I'll see you next week.